Shame or death? Which is worse? Can all sins be forgiven? Or are there some souls beyond redemption? In tonight's episode of The Night Visitor, 6 weary travellers are about to find out in a dark wood. Having nothing better to do, the sun rose once again to blast its pale wintry light onto the ice-crusted mountainscape. It was a frigid oblivion that provided little shelter to Captain Brockauer and his men, just 5, hard-worn soldiers from the Wehrmacht's 1st Mountain Division. Captain Brockauer stopped and lifted his palm without turning.
Halt!
Brockauer raised a monocular to his eye. Up ahead, the Cursed Mountains. That's what the locals called them anyway. A jagged cluster of peaks jutting toward the sterile sky like a set of crude knives. But there was no turning back now.
We'll rest here, then push on.
We might as well commit suicide.
Brockauer briefly glanced back at Jürgen. He and Dietrich had shown more allegiance to their military canines, Uta and Bruno, than they had to their fellow soldiers since fleeing Belgrade. Brockauer assessed the rest of his men. Ravenous, with thoughts of deer or rabbit doubtlessly dancing through their minds.
That's enough, Jürgen. We go west to reconvene with our troops in Montenegro. We're cut off from the south by the Commonwealth in Greece and by the Russians to the east.
The Russians took Belgrade from us while we ran like women.
Our armies were overrun, Dietrich. We did what we had to do.
Yes, feel free to go back to Belgrade, Dietrich. I'll take my chances in these mountains over the Russians any day.
Ludwig, the eldest, and sour-faced as always. If he weren't their medic, Jürgen would have killed him in his sleep. He had probably spent more time saving his own skin than anyone else's.
Ugh, Ludwig. Spoken like the traitor you are. Dietrich and I would rather die next to real men and starve to death with the likes of you.
Not only Russians, also the Bulgarian Second Army drove us from Belgrade. And of course the 13th Yugoslavian Corps pushed us back from the Morava River and cut us off from our regiment. Scattered like seeds. Quite ingenious.
Brockauer regarded the youngest of them, Gottesman, rattling on as he often did. He'd lost his senses in Barov 2 years earlier, but there was no one sane enough in this war to send him home.
Did you know that Belgrade was built on an ancient Roman city? Indeed, it has been occupied by Celts, Goths, Huns, Ottomans.
Shut up, Gottesman. No one is in the mood for your rantings.
That's enough, Jürgen. Mouse, how is that radio coming along?
Mouse, a small, bespectacled young chaplain, shifted uneasily. Of all the things he should be left in charge of, fixing their radio communications. A prayer for their souls would have been more effective, if any of them still feared God.
I can try, Captain, but my hands are quite cold.
Should we get you and Gosman a blanket and start a fire, Mouse? Or should we hold hands and pray? You fucking coward.
There was a movement in the trees, a flash of white. As if in unison, the men all turned their gaze toward it.
Uta! Bruno! Fuss!
Jürgen and Dietrich tightened the leads on their German shepherds. But Brockauer could see it was they whose teeth were bared. Their eyes given over to instinct, alert and wet with violence. Then, something out of the corner of Brockauer's eye.
There! Captain!
Ludwig pointed to a slender girl in a white nightdress, hair wild from the elements. She was barefoot, running 100 meters off from them, halfway across an icy slope. Brockauer noted a streak of blood across the front of her white nightdress. Jürgen and Dietrich were fiendishly fixated on the girl as she hid and peeked out at them from behind a tree. She couldn't have been much more than 12. Brockauer took a single step forward, and raised his arm to initiate his command. But it was Jürgen's voice that called out.
Retrieve!
Jürgen and Dietrich had released their canines and were scrambling in pursuit. The girl fled as Uta and Bruno skidded across the icy slope, but Brockauer knew they would reach their prey. He felt an unfamiliar pain in his chest. Panic.
I want that girl unharmed! Move out!
Go, Bruno!
Go, Uta!
Good boy!
The dogs were across the icy slope now and leapt beyond it into the heavy snowpack. Jürgen and Dietrich were able to catch up to them as they labored against the weight of their ammunition packs. Jürgen watched the girl make her way further up the incline. Impressive, he thought. But still, he and Dietrich had spent many cold winters in Austria, mere boys chasing down rabbit in the thicket. This would be no different.
There she is, entering a pass up ahead.
Dietrich had caught a glimpse of her white nightgown. On flat ground, the dogs would close the distance easily. He glanced over at Jürgen's smiling face.
We have her now.
Out of the way!
Brockauer pushed past them. Not bad for the old man, Jürgen thought. He and Dietrich doubled their pace and then...
Look, Dietrich, there's a wall. A village ahead.
I see it, Jürgen. What is that super girl doing climbing it?
The dogs set their jaws upon her and easily took the girl down by her legs. Brockauer reached them within seconds, but it was too late. He flung the dogs off of the girl as Jürgen, Dietrich, and the rest of his men came upon the gory scene. Jürgen and Dietrich's faces contorted in anger as they retrieved their dogs and replaced their leads. In their minds, their canines were soldiers in their own right, doing their duty. To treat them so, it was unfathomable.
Ludwig, the girl's badly hurt. Carry her inside.
She's a dirty gypsy. Don't we have our own men to worry about?
Finally, Ludwig might prove himself worthy of more than a flogging.
I'm your captain, Ludwig, and that's an order.
Forgive me, Captain, but we're in the middle of a war.
This war is nearly over, Jürgen. Don't worry. As for this predicament, we wouldn't be here if you had any self-control. She's a little girl, for God's sake. Now, which one of you will carry her inside? I suppose I must do everything myself, then.
How did we miss this village, Captain?
Don't you see, Mouse? It's hidden. Ringed in by these treacherous mountains, they blot out the very sun.
It looks as if it was lost in time, but perhaps abandoned.
Well, this girl must belong to someone. My name is Captain Brockauer. We are members of the 1st Mountain Division of His Führer's Wehrmacht. We have a girl. One of your own. She's injured.
Not abandoned after all, it seems.
Yes, Jürgen. Just uninterested.
We mean you no harm. This girl must have medical attention immediately. Her parents... You, there at the door. Old man, does this child belong to you?
Perhaps, Captain, they don't speak our language.
Then out of our way, old man. We're starving.
Jürgen!
There's nothing here. What is this?
Check the pantry, Jürgen.
Perhaps we could ask another way?
Why interfere, Mouse? Jürgen and Dietrich seem to be doing a fine job.
Get off your lazy ass and help us search, Ludwig.
You too, Mouse. This isn't your grandmother's village in Bavaria.
The old man approached Brockauer and silently took the girl from his arms. Brockauer gently helped him set her down on a chair by the hearth. Indeed, how were they surviving? Brockauer saw nothing more than broken crockery and rags for bedding in a small adjacent room.
Ludwig, you will dress her wounds now.
But, Captain, we're starving.
Now!
As you wish. Though I'm not sure why we would waste good medical supplies on a mongrel. Captain.
What is it, Ludwig?
Extraordinary. Her wounds are already healing.
Feel her skin. She's burning with fever. Mouse,
Yes, Captain.
you studied linguistics at the seminary, didn't you?
Well, I studied Latin, Aramaic, and I know some regional Balkan languages.
What's she saying?
I don't know, Captain. It's very unusual.
The snow's getting heavier, Mouse. We are stuck here for the night, but if we can communicate with them, maybe we can find out where their food is.
It could be some kind of local dialect. I'm not sure, though. She's mumbling. Perhaps Albanian. Mixed with Sinti or Roma. I'm not sure.
Ludwig, what's your prognosis?
I don't think she'll make it through the night, Captain. If her wounds didn't kill her, the fever surely will.
The poor wretch.
Then I shall pray for her. Almighty everlasting God, the eternal salvation of them that believe, hear our prayers on behalf of thy servants who are sick, for whom we implore the aid of thy mercy.
Jürgen, would you look at this? Mouse is praying for a bunch of dirty gypsies.
That old heathen doesn't even know you're praying for his filthy little brat, Mouse.
The old man calmly laid a cold rag on the girl's forehead. He dared not meet Dietrich's eyes, as the soldier leaned in close enough to breathe on his cheek.
Or maybe he's a Jew, Jürgen. Only a Jew would be too stingy to pray for his own child.
Does imagining her to be a Jew or a gypsy make it easier for you to kill children, Dietrich? Or is it something in your own nature?
Is this from an officer of the Wehrmacht? Do you hear this, Jürgen?
Captain, with respect, Dietrich is right. We are starving, and yet you defend these animals instead of the Reich.
Listen, the both of you. I've made and broken hundreds of better men than you and led them to their deaths in this filthy war. Don't speak to me about the Reich. There are no men in the Reich. We are all that's left. The radio can wait, Mouse. They must have a store of supplies somewhere in the village to get them through the winter. We'll pair off and search house to house. Ludwig, you'll stay with the girl.
With all due respect, sir, we are wasting our supplies on a corpse.
You'll do as you're told. The rest of you follow me.
Jürgen and Dietrich exchanged a bloodthirsty look, but Brockauer was too busy watching Gottesman, who was staring out the front door, lost in his own world. Brockauer approached him and gently laid a hand on his shoulder.
It's cold out, Gottesman. Put your gloves back on.
The village square was barren and eviscerated by disuse and time. Only a peculiar old church bell lay partially buried at its center. Here, Brockauer leaned back and wearily chewed on his unlit cigar. Jürgen and Dietrich emerged empty-handed yet again and moved on to the next hovel in disgust.
I don't know what will kill us first. Starvation or mutiny?
He sensed a change of pressure in the air, but knew it had less to do with the blizzard now bearing down on them from the east than the crushing darkness that steadily increased with the hunger in his men's eyes. And throughout it all, the villagers watched on, betraying no emotion as their homes were ransacked. Inside one such cottage were Gottesman and Mouse. Mouse was busily looking about the cottage, inspecting the walls and behind the furniture for hidden compartments. After all, it was all too common in this war that families hid valuables, weapons, even their own neighbors in such places. Meanwhile, Gottesman slowly made his way around the cottage as if he were a patron casually browsing an antique furniture store.
You know, Mouse, the Visigoths first invaded the Balkan Peninsula in 268 AD. It was only after their defeat in the Battle of Naissus that they retreated from the region and became known as Arians, a branch of Christianity that was in opposition to the Catholic Church.
Yes, Gottesman, now please, stop talking and make yourself useful. What's this under the floorboard? A book.
Outside, the villagers turned their gaze towards the cottage as one. Brockauer's eyes narrowed.
What's this then?
Jürgen and I have found nothing useful, Captain.
Dietrich is right. No food, no supplies. How do these people live?
Captain,
What is it, Mouse?
a book. I found it in one of the cottages.
A book, Jürgen. Mouse has found the book.
Is it a cookbook, Mouse? Perhaps we can lick the pages.
It looks like a history of the village, perhaps a sacred text. There are illuminated pictures, like a Bible might have, but it isn't religious as far as I can tell, Captain.
I must agree with Jürgen, Mouse. How is this going to help us eat? Even if this storm lets up, it may take us days to navigate out of these mountains.
You want to know about their language? Find out how to communicate with them?
Of course, Mouse.
Well, then look. Aramaic lettering. Their language is a combination of some Roma, yes, and certainly Albanian, the local language, but it contains a great deal of Aramaic, which is highly unusual.
But will you be able to talk to them?
Perhaps. I'll try to speak to the old man, but it seems they are in worse shape than we are as far as food, Captain. The tome is probably their most valuable possession.
What's this picture here, Mouse? Like some kind of plague.
Here's what I think of your book, Mouse.
As a book hit the ground, a village man lunged for it. Dietrich quickly crushed the villager's hand beneath his boot.
Is this what you want, Untermensch?
Dietrich picked the tome up and tore it in half. A ripple of shock went through the crowd, as if something in the villagers had been torn as well. Jürgen picked up a rock and went to the rusted old bell.
Food! Understand, you heathens? Food!
The villagers recoiled in pain, turning away and covering their ears. Mouse took note of it. A severe reaction to the common sound of a church bell. Dietrich ground his foot further into the villager's hand. But it was short-lived. Brockauer grabbed him from behind in a chokehold.
Release him. Now, Dietrich.
Jürgen nearly started for Brockauer, but remembered his place. Reluctantly, he signaled Dietrich to lift his boot off the villager's hand. Brockauer released his chokehold and snatched up the severed tome as Dietrich glared at him hatefully, chest heaving. Brockauer ignored him coolly.
Head back to the cottage, Mouse, and rebind the book after you finish fixing the radio.
Yes, Captain.
The Reich should have retired you, Captain. You were once a hero to soldiers like Dietrich and me. I watched you receive the Iron Cross from the Führer himself. Now you're just an old man gone soft.
Get yourself back to the cabin, Jürgen. You're done here.
Come, Dietrich.
There are no forks or knives here, Captain. You know, the fork was only introduced to Europe in the 11th century as a novelty and only came in common use in the early 1800s.
Yes, Gottesman. Show me what else you found and we'll follow the others in a bit.
Mouse hugged the tome closely as he stared in dread at the wooden post outside the old man's cottage. Still fastened to it were 2 dog leads, empty and abandoned, in a blanket of gently falling snow.
Dear God.
His stomach sank, and a deep chill ran through his bones. Surely there would be hell to pay, and he wanted no part of it. A sound broke his concentration. Mouse retreated to the doorway as Jürgen and Dietrich arrived. By now, he was used to their brutality and stayed out of their reach. But as they took in the scene before them, their faces contorted in such a rage that Mouse was sure he would not be safe for long.
Where are they?
I don't know. Jürgen, I've only just arrived myself.
Out of the way!
Ludwig was startled awake in his chair by the hearth. He took in Jürgen's face and bolted upright, then looked at the girl. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and she was semi-conscious.
What now? I did my job. watching the little wretch likely take her last breaths.
Dietrich lunged at him and nearly lifted him off his feet by his collar. Jürgen seized Ludwig's jaw in his mighty hand and lifted the smaller man's gaze to meet his own.
Where are my dogs?
Jürgen, I didn't...
Jürgen unholstered his pistol and pointed it at Ludwig's face. Dietrich held his collar tightly and was nearly choking him.
You lazy cow! You couldn't keep your eyes open for 2 minutes to stop these thieving villagers from taking our dogs?
Jürgen, I had nothing to do with it. I was tired. I'm starving!
What is this? Put down your weapon, Jürgen. That's an order.
But, Captain, they took Uta and Bruno. Ludwig was sleeping at his post.
That's enough, Dietrich. You're both in violation of a direct order from a superior officer. And if you do not stop this mutiny, I will.
Brockauer held the pistol to Jürgen's head and cocked it. For a moment, time seemed to freeze, until a single bead of sweat trickled slowly down Jürgen's temple. Mouse watched from the door, agape. Any number of outcomes seemed possible now. Jürgen's jaw was set, but his eyes shifted quickly back and forth between Ludwig and Brockauer's pistol.
I don't need to waste the bullet anyway.
Your pistol and rifle. Now, Jürgen.
As you command, Captain.
You as well, Dietrich. Ludwig may be pathetic, but he's still worth more than a dog.
If you'll pardon me, Captain, Uta and Bruno are more than dogs. They have saved lives on the battlefield, which is more than I could say for Ludwig.
I'm sure they simply escaped from their leads, Dietrich, and will return when they're hungry.
They're already hungry. We all are.
Yes, Jürgen, which is why Gottesman and I will conduct a survey of the surrounding area for hidden food stores. Meanwhile, you and Dietrich will remain here until you can follow orders. Mouse, you will continue with the repair of our radio. And Ludwig, I trust you will stay awake.
Jawohl, Kapitan.
Gottesman, take a moment to warm yourself by the hearth. There's no promise of shelter where we're going.
Heavy clouds dimmed the afternoon light as Brockauer and Gottesman walked the village fields. The snowfall continued. Gottesman stretched his tongue out and caught a perfect flake. He remembered those snowy days at home as a boy, but those days were gone now. He must keep the memories away, he thought. Keep them from breaking through and flooding his mind.
Did you know, Captain? Snowflakes are condensed water droplets which always form into hexagonal, six-armed crystals. Always six. This is due to the geometry of water
Look,
crystals.
Gottesman, a plough in the field. Where there are ploughs, there are crops.
There are crops, but there are no crops. Never used.
What's that?
On my family's farm, we would never have left a plough in the snow.
But he mustn't think of the farm now. Gottesman dropped to his knees and dug through the snow furiously. He tasted the soil beneath it.
What are you doing?
This field is dead.
Dead?
It has not been used in years. The earth is dead.
Do you see that spire in the distance? Just beyond the pines. A church, it seems. Come.
In the fall, we grew apples, pears, grapes, mulberries, lingonberries.
Back at the old man's cottage, Mouse fiddled with the radio, then put it down in favor of the ancient tome. He browsed the pages. Jürgen leaned sourly against the wall and watched with disgust as the old man put a cold compress on his granddaughter's forehead. She writhed in discomfort.
This is ridiculous. We should be out looking for Uta and Bruno instead of sitting here like school children.
Dietrich stared daggers at the old man, his snow-caked boots propped on the kitchen table.
I'm with you, Jürgen.
Captain Brockauer
To
told
the
us.
devil with Brockauer. And this stupid book of yours, Mouse.
Oh, give it back. Jürgen.
Shut up! You should be working on the radio. But perhaps a mouse like you would like us all to stay here, away from the war, all safe and cozy. Maybe that radio isn't broken after all.
It is! You don't believe me? You fix it!
Perhaps I'll fix you instead.
But he's never worked properly in his life, Jurgen.
Why don't you both stop your bullying? Everyone is tired of watching Brockauer put you in your place.
But I have the book now, Ludwig. The book of power. We know what to do with books, don't we, Dietrich?
Jurgen held the tome over the fire, and, as if in answer, the girl's eyes popped open. The old man tensed, like a snake about to strike.
Oh, you don't like that, eh? Okay, I give it back to Mouse, and he read you a nice bedtime story. You and Ludwig are a waste to the Reich, Mouse. Dietrich and I are going out to find our dogs. Tell that to your captain when he returns.
Trudging across the graveyard of an abandoned church was unpleasant, though certainly not worse than a battlefield. And yet, Brockauer wondered at the state of it. The burial grounds were all but consumed by forest pines grown tall in their midst. Tree roots, too, had burrowed deep, felling tombstones or forcing others to jut out, gruesomely askew.
There is no shame here for their dead.
What is worse? Shame or death? Death or shame? Choices. Choices.
I doubt it's been any less than 100 years since a living soul set foot in this cemetery. Or in that church.
East-West Schism of 1054, yes. And here we are in the north, quite north indeed. As in quite likely a Catholic church. No, most definitely a Roman Catholic.
Brockauer felt a shiver as he peered toward the church. It was shrouded from view by thick forest. He could just make its steeple out, deathly still in the blue twilight.
The sun is setting now, Gottesman. We'll need to search quickly for any remaining records. Births, baptisms, deaths.
Brockauer instinctively shot a look toward the sound, but it was just Gottesman, mumbling to himself by one of the gravestones.
What if we take
He
here?
sighed at the familiarity of the young soldier's madness. Perhaps he'd made a mistake bringing him here, given the younger man's time in Barove.
What have we there, Gottesman?
Brockauer came up behind him and leaned down, removing the dead brush from its crude stone surface. The year of death? 1534. He then reached over to sweep off the tombstones on either side of it. Again and again. 1534.
13. 1 plus 5 plus 3 plus 4. 13. Did you know that the number 13 is considered bad luck in Western culture due to the slaughter of the Knights Templar by Pope Innocent on Friday the 13th? However, in the Jewish culture, it's considered good luck. Indeed, representing the 13 tribes of Israel.
Gottesman's voice trailed off as he headed toward the church, but Brockauer lingered behind.
Why all the same year?
No matter. They were nearly out of daylight now. He quickened his pace to join Gottesman and headed toward the church.
Uta!
Bruno!
Here! Fish!
Here, boy!
Where are you, girl?
Jurgen and Dietrich were furious as they searched beyond the village walls. Jurgen wondered if perhaps these savage villagers had eaten the dogs by now.
There will be blood if anything has happened to them.
Jurgen looked up into the descending snow and darkness. The sun had already fallen behind the sheer mountainscape, dropping the temperature so that the men could barely feel their toes through their boots.
Uta!
Bruno!
Here!
Fish! Herr Korbe!
Stop! Listen!
Jurgen and Dietrich reached for their weapons, empty holsters.
Brockauer, du Fotze!
Dietrich's hands trembled at the sudden desperation in Jurgen's voice. The men slowly stood back to back and faced whatever the wilderness might conceal.
The dogs!
Uta Uta slowly crawled out of the thicket, but she was not at all herself. She seemed tired, her head sunken low, her eyes empty. Her mouth was frothing. What had they done to her?
That's a good girl. Herkommen, Uta. This.
Be careful, Dietrich.
Dietrich looked at Jürgen with dismay, then edged closer to her. Uta bared her fangs. Just as quickly, she changed her mind and started licking his fingers. Dietrich's bewilderment shifted to relief as he turned to face Jürgen, and the two men smiled. Then suddenly, out from the shadows, Bruno leapt across the clearing and sank his teeth into Dietrich's neck. Blood spurted from his jugular as he fell to his knees, grabbing at Bruno and trying to dislodge him, but only making it worse as the feral beast tightened his jaws. Jürgen froze in shock as Uta turned on Dietrich too, mauling him in a frenzy. Jürgen staggered back in shock and horror. He turned and ran, his mind whirling as he stumbled through the deep snow. The dogs expertly leapt after him through the trees, leaving Dietrich to his death, his blood staining the virgin snow around him. Jürgen nearly gained the village wall, but ironically slipped. Hadn't he laughed at the young girl just that morning? How quickly fortunes change. He turned to see his once beloved comrades closing in for the kill. It was too late. Uta sank her teeth into his leg and took him down as Bruno tore into him. Back at the old man's cottage, Mouse jumped at the sound of Jürgen's scream, dropping the tome on the floor.
Did you hear that, Ludwig?
What's that, Mouse?
A scream from outside.
That howling. I imagine it's nothing out of the ordinary in this place. The old man doesn't seem concerned.
That was definitely a scream. Jürgen and Dietrich, they're out there. We should go to them.
Would they do the same for you, Mouse?
Well, perhaps you're right.
Mouse reached for the ancient book, which had fallen open to a series of illustrations. He lifted it to look closer.
And the Lord of the Dead sent a great plague to our people.
Mouse ran his fingers along the image of a great plague afflicting the village.
And provided in death what was provided in life.
Mouse inspected the next image of several adults feeding on a young boy's blood.
For those he delivers unto death shall not perish.
Mouse turned the page to a final image, that of a small girl placed on an altar. Seized by a fear so primal he could barely breathe, Mouse furtively glanced toward the hearth. There, the old man's eyes met his defiantly, and the young seminarian felt his blood run cold.
It's pitch black inside, Gottesman. Give me your gas lamp.
Gottesman fidgeted in the entrance of the church as gaslight illuminated the older man's face. They had stepped into a scene of demonic proportions. Stained glass windows smashed in, walls covered in mold and vegetation, and icons with faces burned away. Most chilling was a massive inverted crucifix behind the altar as snow drifted through a gaping hole in the ceiling.
My God. In the fall, they grew pumpkin, squash, asparagus.
It's all right, Gottesman. Don't be afraid. Follow me down the center aisle. Just there beyond the altar, there's a small door.
They planted beetroot, celery, parsnips, turnips.
Moonlight fell across Jürgen's face as he lay on his back in the snow. His eyes were open. Blood bubbled at the corners of his mouth, agape. He was alive, but only just, as Uta and Bruno tore at his body. The dogs sensed something and backed away. Jürgen saw it, looming in the trees. His eyes went wide at the sight of a man. No, a beast. Something in between, crouching like a gargoyle in the branches above him. In the darkness, he could only see its teeth, long and pointed, and its eyes, yellow and reflected like an animal's. Then he heard an unholy sound. Death would not come for Jürgen on the battlefield. No. It would not come with honor and righteousness, as he had once believed, or even the grace of a benevolent creator. No. It would come as a destroyer, a night terror, wrought from the shadows of hell itself, a judge and executioner from which all redemption was lost.
Watch your step, Gottesman. It's quite dark. Don't drop the lantern.
Yes, Captain.
Wait, what's this? This door must lead to the bell tower. But why is it locked?
We found the other bell, Captain.
Yes. It seems this bell is identical to the one we found in the square. It must have been taken from here, but why? And why leave this one behind?
It's quite rusted in place, Captain.
Indeed. Still, quite strange.
You know, bells were introduced to Eastern Europe in the 9th century. They were often baptized before being hung to ward off evil spirits, and the sound was thought to drive demons away.
But what's this? The ring has been removed. Who would do such a thing? Who would desecrate a church like this? What the hell was that? Gottesman, back to the cottage, quickly!
Captain! Captain!
Mouse! What are you doing in the village square? What's happened? Gottesman and I heard screams.
Yes! Beyond the village walls. I'm sorry, Captain, but Jürgen and Dietrich left to find the dogs.
They were ordered to stay put.
I tried to stop them, but they wouldn't listen.
We must organize a search.
Wait! Captain! There's something you must know. Look, here in the tomb. There was a plague. See this? It's a number written in Aramaic. 1534, the year the village was afflicted.
1534. The year on the tombstones.
What tombstones, Gottesman?
He's right. There was an old abandoned cemetery. 1534 was the latest year we could find on the tombstones.
Look here. The adults were feeding on children. It seems they were driven to cannibalism.
My God.
And here, it looks as if they are sacrificing a little girl on an altar. It seems she was the source of a plague that spread to the rest of the children in the village.
So, then they died from the plague?
I am afraid it's much worse than that, Captain. In the end, the villagers killed the children, all of them.
So, what does all this mean now?
No fresh graves, no farms, no animals. There's no church, no children, only the girl. The girl.
What are you saying, Mouse? The plague was over 4 centuries ago.
Why do you think she was in the woods when we found her? What was she doing?
She was running away from the village.
Yes, Gottesman. Running away. Then they are still feeding on the flesh of their own children.
Indeed. This book is not only a history, it is their Bible. A parable of their rise after the plague, of how they survived in isolation all these years. But how do they decide which children live and die? And why are there almost no children now?
Never mind all that. You must fix the radio, Mouse.
Yes, Captain. But the villagers...
Arm yourself and protect the girl. It's imperative that we call for help before the storm traps us here. Take Gottesman with you and stick together.
And you, Captain?
I will go into the woods on my own to track down Jürgen and Dietrich.
Brockauer slipped into the moonlit woods, thick with pine, and quickly lost sight of the village walls just behind him.
Scheiße! What is that foul smell?
Brockauer shielded his eyes from the flare, then looked down. He reeled back in horror. Dietrich's entrails were strewn gruesomely in the blanched snow. His head was the only recognizable part of him remaining, eyes wide open. Brockauer dropped the flare, its light subdued in the crimson slush, and lurched forward. His mind raced. This was no ordinary killing, no simple attack by a beast. There was a sense of ritual in the way the body was dissected and dismembered. He must return to his men before. But no, he couldn't think of it, or it would stop his blood entirely. The village walls were in view now, and this was all his racing mind could think to overcome next. Mouse arrived at the door of the old man's cottage with Gottesman and hesitated. He was a man of God, but this was no time for prayer. He gave Gottesman the tome and unslung his rifle. Gottesman remained outside, handling the book in wonderment as Mouse pushed the door open. Mouse entered and watched the old man carefully as he found his way to the radio. He glanced at the girl, still fevered, as he put down his rifle. Sure he wasn't being watched, he opened the back of the radio expertly and retrieved a circuit from his pocket.
Well, here goes my chance to stay out of the war. Mayday. Mayday, this is Alpha Bravo Romeo. Do you read? Mayday, Mayday, this is Alpha Bravo Romeo. Do you read?
Alpha Bravo Romeo, this is Army Command East. We read you. What are your coordinates?
Latitude 40 degrees, 24 minutes, 56.69 seconds north. Longitude 19 degrees, 45 minutes, 19.64 seconds east.
Copy that. What is your status?
We're caught in a village in unfriendly territory. We may have had 2 casualties already. We have no supplies. Few weapons. Over.
You're in a remote area, Alpha Bravo. You can send mountaineers from Montenegro, but it will take at least 2 days to reach you. Can you hold out? Over.
We have no choice. We'll be waiting. Over.
God be with you. Over and out.
Mouse's fate was sealed. Once the authorities learned he had manipulated the radio, he would surely be court-martialed. Then again, he only hoped to be alive long enough to be tried for treason. Something was off, though. He looked at the old man and the girl, then turned to Ludwig's chair. Empty. Mouse called back toward the bedroom doorway.
Ludwig, you sleeping?
Just then, a shadow crossed over him. He turned in relief.
I knew you were too lazy to go very far.
Gottesman had wandered from the cottage several yards now and was flipping through the tome, marveling at its gilded yet horrific imagery. He stopped and rubbed the corner with more concentration.
Anthropodermic bibliopegy. Yes, indeed. The practice of binding books in human skin. Quite delicate, quite delicate. Yeah, yes, indeed. Oh!
Was it voices he heard? Gottesman didn't like the sound, but he felt compelled to know more, as he always did. He held the tome tightly and scuffled along the wall toward the back of the cottage.
Very quiet now. Yes. Be quiet, Gottesman.
Gottesman stood frozen. Hanging upside down from a tree was Ludwig, his throat cut, blood draining into a wooden trough. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a choking gasp. Gottesman trembled and backed away.
13. It's the number of participants in the Last Supper. The number of dimensions in the theory of relativity. The number of full moons in a year. According to the Torah, God has 13 attributes of mercy.
Gottesman instantly ran from the back of the cottage, but slowed. After all, the villagers might be watching. He crept along the wall, but stopped short as Brockauer burst through the village gate and ran toward the old man's cottage. Gottesman went to call out, but caught himself. Villagers had exited their homes and were quickly approaching. There was no time. He thought of Barov suddenly. He had hid then, too, as German soldiers took flamethrowers to the tiny village. And the women and the children, the old, what was left of them, were gathered in the church. He could still feel the heat on his face as he watched it burn to the ground with all of them inside, screaming and crying for mercy. And then he could remember nothing.
No. Must not think of it now.
Gottesman looked at the village gate. There was his chance. He slipped out from the shadows unseen and into the woods. Brockauer slowed his pace as he neared the cottage and went around the side. He peered in through the window to see Mouse being drained of blood by the girl. She leaned over Mouse, biting into his neck as the old man and several other villagers held him down for her. The old man smiled, revealing elongated canines. Vampires! No! Brockauer slammed his palm against the window pane. The vampires looked up at him. He turned his rifle on them. To his horror, they were unfazed, bleeding but unharmed. Mouse saw Brockauer and managed to call out.
It's the girl! She is the plague! They were only waiting for us to call in for more troops, for more food! The Tom! It says they fear the bell! Hurry!
Brockauer watched in horror as they sank their teeth back into Mouse. But he couldn't leave Mouse, not like this. Brockauer lifted his rifle and aimed at the boy. The vampires walked about angrily to face Brockauer, their feeding interrupted. The girl bared her teeth in a gruesome coat of gore that washed down her pale chin and neck. Her eyes went wild. The villagers were closing in from all sides now. He saw the bell tower in the distance, perhaps there, but there was no time to think. He pulled out his pistol and ran across the square. Desperately, Brockauer fired his pistol at the broken bell in the square. Instantly, the vampires reeled, howling in terror at the singing brass and covering their ears. Brockauer only looked back a split second, but when he did, his heart nearly leapt out of his chest. The church was his only refuge now, for already the vampires were resuming their advance. Some held torches as they chased him. Others seemed to grow more bestial by the second, clawing and crawling over every tomb and tree. Bursting into the church and its gruesome scene of desecration, Brockauer froze, for now it was accompanied by the rumbling of the earth itself. He looked up to see vampires crawling up the walls and across the ruined ceiling. There was no semblance of humanity now. They were what they had always been, creatures of the night. He made a desperate dash for the tower stairwell, barely avoiding his pursuers as they hurled themselves toward him. Hordes of demons nipped at his heels as he raced to the top and smashed through the door to the bell tower. Brockauer was within inches of death. vampires bounding toward him and crawling up the side of the steeple, fanged mouths gaping horrifically. He leapt. He rang the bell with the butt of his rifle, forcing the creatures back down the stairwell as if struck by a physical blow. Brockauer slammed the door shut and locked it. A moment, then a mighty push on the door, cracking its surface. Down the stairwell they went again, vampires retreating like insects at the sound, clenching their fanged teeth and covering their pointed ears, but not for long. They slowly crept forward again, pushing against the door. And so, the night wore on. Again and again, Brockauer would sound the bell, and each time, the beasts would retreat, only to return ever more ravenous and flush with rage. The knell echoed across the mountains and dimly found its way to Gottesman's ears. He had been scrambling up the mountain passes all night, counting each toll of the bell he could still make out.
$4.75. $4.76. Alicia, mein Gott has heard. $4.77. $4.78. Alicia, what? My God has judged.
As Gottesman climbed over the next ridge, he halted abruptly at the sight of a majestic valley below. A small town in the distance. He haggardly threw off his army uniform, keeping only the boots, his long johns, and his coat. The sun would be rising in moments. He turned just once to look back at the sheer mountains and the village that lay hidden within, and then continued onward, clutching the tome close to his chest. Back at the bell tower, Brockauer laid on his back, spent and weak. He rang the bell in a stupor and waited, pistol in one hand, rifle in the other. The vampires waited too, for him to tire, to sleep, their claws occasionally visible through the cracks in the door. His mind wandered. Was he awake? Or was he dreaming now? He spoke softly to himself in his reverie.
How can I blame them? They are only surviving like we all are. And like us, they are members of an unforgivable breed, caught in a war we are meant to lose. The illusion of immortality is a nightmare, yes. Perhaps even a plague, luring us into a prison of our own making. It's only right that I'm here with my punishment. The decision to either toll the bell until I tire and they overcome me, or to turn the gun on myself now. But I ring the bell. I was the monster, and now I am the victim too. I am the Jew, the gypsy, the other, caught for now in the dream of escape, of the desperate hope that deep in the core of every monster beats a human heart.
Tonight's episode of The Night Visitor, In a Dark Wood, was written and produced by Peter Stas and Blarima Tapali. It starred Jonathan Tyndall as Captain Brockhour, Joshua Kaknich as Gottesman, Oliver Palmer as Mouse, Andrew Falaise as Jürgen, Chapman Hyatt as Dietrich, and Chris Harkham as Ludwig. Music by Josh Allen. Sound designer and sound mixer and additional music, Bailey Math. Dialogue editor, Christopher Barrick. Sound engineers, Ben Connors and Gaston Martinez Acosta. Special thanks to Randy Hudson at Voxpod Studios. I'm your host, Annabelle Kappa. Until next time, sweet dreams.